In Chapter 12, we learn about SAS libraries and permanent SAS datasets. And these are files that are compatible with a PC or Windows operating system. When we create a dataset, whether it's data input, data lines, or data in file input, or using an output statement on some of the procedures we have learned so far, those data sets we created, I say, exist in SAS memory while we're working in SAS. We close the SAS session and those remembered data sets go away. We would have to rerun the programs to reestablish those. So whenever we look in SAS and look at this Explorer tab here to the left side of the SAS screen, if you go to Libraries, that's what we're going to focus on in this chapter, is learning how to create new libraries and how to locate our data sets. So if you click on Libraries here, and what we have been actually working with so far is the work library. Now the other libraries that you have here in your SAS installation may differ from what I have on screen here. So some of these are installation dependent, and so these are other libraries that SAS needs to function for the procedures or for the SAS products installed on your computer. So if I go to the work library, I just opened the SAS session. I haven't done any work yet, and so there's nothing in the work library. This is that temporary holding facility, if you will, for your data sets. So if we look at the first objective in Chapter 12, which is just to take this data set, very simple data set here, with 3 variables x, y, and z, and I've got 4 observations. And if I just submit this data step, I have a run statement so I know it'll go. I can put the semicolon on the line by itself if I want, but notice when I ran this, now all of a sudden the work library is populated with this data set called 1. If I look at the log, it says here that work.1 has 4 observations and 3 variables. So previously we said we wanted to focus on this second part when we've been looking at our log files to examine if our data set has the right number of observations and variables. But now we look at this work.1. This is referred to as the 2-level SAS name. So 2-level SAS name, the first part or first level there is the library. The second is the name of the data set, and so we see that over here. And then in Chapter 8 we looked at view table, so we know we can double click on this and open that data set 1 in the view table. So we see view table down here, work.1. We also see it up here in the upper left hand corner. And if we're going to make any modifications to this data set, a reminder that we need to close view table. So if you want to add any new variables, use a set or a merge or any kind of sort, anything that's going to change the contents of this data set or the order of this data set, you have to close it in view table to do that. So if I close view table, I still have this in the editor. So we want to learn then about these libraries here. So the default library is work, and then we can, whatever we've been using for our data set names is shown here, and so that the data set name follows the usual SAS naming conventions. Now this is clearly a small data set and took not long at all to create, but suppose you have a data set then that has several thousand lines of data and perhaps very wide in that it has a number of variables. Just reading the data set in every SAS session or every program could take a great deal of time. So is there a way we can create a file that SAS recognizes that is data? We know if it has a .sas extension and we've saved it from the editor, it's a SAS program, but is there another way we can save a file that SAS is going to recognize as a SAS data set so we don't have to read it in every time, read and create it every time by any of those methods that I mentioned at the beginning of this video? So we want to learn how to create a new SAS library. So work is just for the stuff that SAS saves during the current SAS session. We need to create another library that is whenever we look here, we'll see a new library name, and if we go to Explorer and level up, we'll see a new library here, a new file drawer, and that's where we're going to store our new data sets. And those data sets will appear there, but they'll also create a file on our computer in a point we designate. Now there are multiple ways to create a new library in SAS, and the libraries we're going to create exist for the current SAS session, and I'll explain then how that differs from creating a SAS data set for the current SAS session. Okay, so we can do this in the editor window using the syntax lib name and then specify a libref here, and then the drive in the folder path, not an actual, you don't include a file name here, just the drive folder and any subfolders that may apply for where you wish to locate this new library. And so the libref is created using the SAS naming conventions with the additional restriction of keep it to 8 characters. And you can use the drive folders, the path specification here. You can put in single quotes or double quotes, whatever you choose. So this is just a single command that you can put in the editor and submit this, and it declares or defines this new location for where data sets are to be stored. And so that you can have one lib name statement per program. You can have multiple lib name statements if you need multiple libraries in that particular SAS program. And so that this allows you to name something by whatever this library reference is for the current SAS session. Additionally, whenever you're in SAS, if you let the mouse hover for a second on this little file drawer with the starburst on it, this is the button for declaring a new library. And so if we click on it, you can specify here, this is the equivalent of libref in that syntax, and then you specify the path. You have the option here of browsing to it. At this time, I would encourage you not to select this enable at startup, because you don't want your SAS installation to become too congested with a number of library names. So, and then once you select those, then you can OK your way out, and it will create that. In the Explorer window here on the left, it's kind of grayed out here, but we can see the tab below. If we right click, we can click on new, and it's going to, since this is looking at active libraries, it knows we're not wanting to build a new file but a new library, so we get that same dialog for a new library. And then one of the perhaps probably the lesser used commands then to do this would likely be up here in the command line, where you can enter the lib assign here, and that also will open that dialog for a new library. So most of us are accustomed to using the point and click approach, and so probably not using the command up here, but if you forget one of the other ways, you know that one exists. So if I want to create a new library, then I can do that anywhere in the program. I typically do it at the top of a program, perhaps just after my display manager commands. I don't have any here. So if I had lib name and then class, looking at objective 12.2, and then I want to specify a folder, and so in the book it's F. I'm on my computer here today. I'm going to have to use the K drive and K/, and I can stop there. If I look at my K drive just for a moment, okay, these are the folders I have there. I can SAS data sets, and then there's these first and last items here are associated with the brand of USB device I have. SAS objectives, I've been saving those all along here. So I can choose, if I just choose K, I can deposit it out here. If I go to SAS data sets, that's where I was putting the tornado data sets from chapter 8 was in that file. So we can choose to do either K or K data sets, or we can create a new folder. Any of those are okay. So if I come out here and just say that I want to put those on K, notice as soon as I did that, close the quotation there, I've got some errors on here because I haven't punctuated, and that creates the library right there, just that one line. So I could highlight that line and submit it and have the new library declared. If I want the contents of this data set 1 put in this library, then I need to use the two-level SAS name in the data statement or wherever the statement that creates that. So it's either a data statement such as this or an output statement such as we saw on the univariate and the means procedures. You could use the two-level SAS name there. If you only use the data set name, such as we've been doing up until this point in the book, if you only use the data set name, it's going to go to the work library. So here, if I put class.1, then now this will put the data set 1 into the class library. And I don't have to stick with the same name here. I can rename it whatever I want. Okay, so if I just look at this command first, ordinarily would submit everything, but if I just look at this and submit, so notice what changed over here. There's a class library here. You double click, there's nothing in it. It was just created. You can arrow up or level up, come back to the active libraries, and then we come over here, class.1, and so you can rerun everything, but also let me show you the log before we do. I just ran that one statement without a run statement and it worked. The library class was successfully assigned as follows, and it says it's at the K drive. V9 we'll talk about shortly, but it stands for version 9. Okay, so if I move back to the program, okay, and I can submit all, or I could just redo the data step. Now it doesn't look like it did anything because, well, I didn't ask for any output, so I'm not going to get any. But I come back in here, and so it's done this twice in here because I submitted the live name statement twice. Class.1. So now look here, the data set is class.1 with 4 observations and 3 variables. Okay, if I click over here, I've got this data set 1 here now. If I go to my File Explorer, go back one, I have 1.sas7bdat. This sas7bdat is the default extension for a permanent SAS dataset. This created a file on my USB device, or if I specified a folder on my hard drive of the computer or any external storage device, I would have an additional file there. So this SAS7bdat, anything with that extension is a permanent SAS data set. SAS recognizes it, and I don't have to go through all the data input data lines or data in file input or whatever method I use to create that data set. SAS is going to recognize it without having a data step in my program. Now, one of the most common errors I have in working with new programmers is that they'll run the live name statement to declare the library here, but they'll neglect to put the library name here. Okay, so what this does is it creates the class library but doesn't put anything in it. When it creates this right here, this is still going to go to the work library because this line for the data step doesn't target any folder on the computer to put this in, or doesn't target any library in which to put data set 1. So you want to be very careful with this. If you declare the library, it's not enough to declare it, but then you have to say you have to recognize I'm putting something in it as well. So if we again level up here, so these are the active libraries. This is kind of the default position for the Explorer at the left hand side of your SAS window, and all of these here were the default except for class. This is the one that we created using this library name, so it didn't hurt that we went ahead and executed this line more than once. If I assigned class to another folder, then I would have some problems, and SAS would give me a warning about that. So we can go to the Explorer tab to see what our active libraries are. If you close the Explorer tab for some reason to get a full width view perhaps of your program or your results viewer, you can come up here and you can type lib for libraries, and so this also gives you the active library, so it gives us the same information we saw here. The additional information we get is that we get the path for where these are stored, and so these program files that go to SAS Foundation, etc., these are what SAS set up at installation whenever we installed it on the computer. So those were things we didn't control. This is the one we controlled, and it was to now the K drive, and so that you can have many libraries, active libraries here in a single SAS session, and so that if you type lib on the command line, get a little more information here. I like that information as well. Now notice as we've been changing things here, we're not in the editor window, and so we get different buttons up here at the top, and so you want to be aware of that. There's not a submit option even possible here, so we don't see that submit icon up here anymore either. I have this active library, so notice across the bottom of the screen I have a lib name here, and so that opened a new window. I can close that as long as I don't close the whole SAS session and get back to my editor and log windows that I'm accustomed to seeing. We can also look at the properties associated with a data set. And so here it tells me the name of it. It gave me a creation date here, the location. It just says class.1. And so there are several other things we can look at across here in terms of our column names and so forth. So we can find out a little bit more about our data sets if we go right click on it and go to properties. If we have created a permanent SAS data set, then it will always be the case that it has a two-level SAS name here. We can how we use this. So let's move to a new editor window. Pretend for a moment that we have not, this is our first thing exercise once we've entered SAS, so that if we know we're going to use that data set and we know its library, so I declare the library name here again. This was in our K drive. And suppose I just want to run a procedure, and an easy one then for me to look at is the means procedure. And so I put the two-level SAS name here. Okay, so I create the library class. I pick up the dataset class. So say this is my first action. All right. And I just want to look at the default summary statistics for variables X, Y, and Z, and I want to output those to a new data set I'm going to call 2. We're not case sensitive here. I'm trying to be mindful of using uppercase and lowercase so that the things I'm typing in lowercase then you can change to make project specific. Alright, so if this is the first program I open, if I know I've created the SAS data set and stored it on the K drive, then I need a library name statement to recognize it. Do I have to use the name class each time? No, you can call it whatever you want in a new SAS session. But if you've used the two-level name here, use the class library in a list of procedures, then of course you'd want to keep the name the same here. So declare the library in the K drive, and so here I'm going to just compute the default statistics for variables X, Y, and Z. In an output data set called 2, I'm going to recover the means and the range. Now remember, range is not one of the response statistics, or one of the statistics that comes in the default set, so your requested recovery statistics here don't have to match the ones produced by the procedure. Okay, so for this entire thing, then I'm going to submit this. It's switched over here to the results, so let me know I have some information that showed up in the results viewer, and that's the summary statistics here. Variables X, Y, and Z, 4 observations, the min and the max. So if I can take the difference between those mentally, I get what the range is. Come back over here, go to the Explorer tab. It was last in class, so I still have that data set 1 there. Let's level up. Go to the work library. Now it has a data set 2 here because in the program here I created a data set called 2. If I look at the log, right, we successfully assigned the library out 2, and then we have work.2. So that 2-level SAS name is what's being used here, and it's what's been used all along. We just didn't really recognize that as the 2-level SAS name. We hadn't defined that term yet. So 1 observation, 8 variables. Well, I know what 6 of them are. What are the 7th and 8th? So we can look at this. Type, frequency 4 for all of these, and so notice then we get our means for each of our 3 variables and the ranges for each of our 3 variables. Okay, and that's in the work library. Close the view table. Whoops, clicked on the wrong X, didn't I? Doesn't want to close, so we'll just go back here. Good, because I had this highlighted. What if you wanted this data set 2 if you want it to be permanent? Well, you can do that. So anytime you name a data set, you can use the 2-level SAS name. So do you want it to be in the same place as 1, or do you want a different library? So if you want it to be in the same library as 1, then you can just say, okay, I want to put it in the same library as this. If I wanted it to be in a different library, say class 2, then I need a library name statement up here for class 2, and I need to specify a path for it. Now I'm just generically writing F here. I don't have an available F on the computer here, but that is so. The point is whenever you run one of these, you can pull a data set in from one library and create results that you store in a different library by a different name. So as long as the 2-level SAS names are different, you're okay. So I'm going to take this out because I don't have an F defined in this session, and come back down here and just call it class. So now then if I run all this, alright, I don't have a display manager, so that's why I'm getting these twice. And I look, and it tells me here, class.2. Okay, so if I go out off SAS here, get my USB, I've got dataset 1 and dataset 2. Okay, and so that these are things then that SAS would recognize automatically as long as I use a library name statement, a lib name statement, or declare the new library using point and click functions such as the new library name here or the lib assign over here, and then or the right click here. Now in the process, I see what I did is I closed the over here. Notice I lost my Explorer tab. So view, Explorer, doesn't put it back in the same place, but if you're looking for libraries and need to know their path, that's not a bad thing, and so that you get the complete path for each of the libraries. Now I've deviated from the book a bit in this last demonstration, so I do encourage you to read the book. I want to talk a little bit about engine types. Our SAS data set, since we're working with version 9.4, the engine type is version 9, and data sets created in versions 7, 8, and 9 all are formatted the same and all have this SAS7B DAT extension that we saw when the files get stored. in a folder. And so those they have in common. And so what's important with the version number, if any of you are working with data sets that come from an older study SAS created, so if you've pulled a data set from years ago that was a permanent SAS data set but not one of those 7, 8, or 9 versions, SAS can read it, but you have to tell it to. And so what happens then is, in your program, if you have an older, I'll keep with the class, but just call it class older version, you have to specify the version of it, and so you can say that it's version 6, and then what the location is. Older versions of files then have an SD2 or SSD extension. So those are actually going back to the 1990s for the SD2, and then older than that for the SSD. So it's popular currently to do meta-analyses and things where we're pulling information from older studies and trying to composite it with current information, and so that would be an instance in where you might see that pop up. Some of the other products that are point-and-click products within SAS that we don't use, day one you need to know about libraries and data set names. You have to know that 2-level SAS naming convention. There are some other products that within SAS then that are point-and-click products, such as Enterprise Miner. There's also another, you can get into Enterprise Guide, and both of those require that you know the 2-level SAS naming convention for data sets when you start. So in terms of a program, there's no 2-level naming convention there, just for SAS data sets. So key components to remember then is that if you start a new SAS session and a new program and you need to access a SAS data set that's been stored, then you're going to need a lib name statement, and you're going to need to investigate the full path at which that data set, or in which that data set is stored. And then the name of your library reference, it can change from program to program, so that this K drive doesn't always have to be class. I can call it something else. If I had anything of an older version on my K drive, I could do this, and it would just show me those that had the version 6 extension, but I didn't put any on my K drive that did that. Okay, so I hope this gives you a handle on 2-level SAS names. Very, very convenient when you have large data sets and you don't want to spend a lot of time bringing in data. So I recently had the opportunity to work with a very large data set. It was 500,000 lines of data, and it took a very long time for the data step to run. And so almost an hour. It took an hour for the data step to run. Well, that's an hour I don't want to invest every time I run the program or every day. So creating a permanent SAS data set that SAS can just pick up, that's quite a convenience. So it also allows me to pass a data file from one programmer to another and say this is a permanent SAS data set for this project or for this study. That's all for SAS libraries for now. We will be using them in the future chapters, so do get familiar with it.